obviously happy to answer any and all questions. Tremendously disappointing season. Not nearly good enough. I think we all know that. We came into this year with, deservedly so, very high expectations, and we didn't come close to meeting them. And I'm keenly aware of that. I'm the architect of the team. I'm responsible for it. I understand how frustrated our fan base is. I understand how frustrated everyone in this building is today, everyone associated with the Mets. And we got to do better. And I'm committed to moving us forward and doing better. We'll have ample time here, I'm sure, to discuss the what and the why. I'll start off up top with a few of my overarching observations. From a roster construction perspective, on the run prevention side of the ball, we didn't do a good enough job of fortifying our team when we had injuries midseason. Clearly, that was a point in our season where on the run prevention side of things, we went from a very good team to a team that wasn't good enough to maintain a sizable lead, not only in the division, but in the playoff chase. Our defense wasn't good enough, and that certainly contributed to our pitching challenges. And then offensively, we had a number of players who had really good years, but we failed to score the runs that we needed to score despite those really good years. And so you add all that up, and you get to a team that underachieved greatly. We know that. I certainly know that. And we're going to work really hard to fix that going forward, learn from this, and do a heck of a lot better. So happy to answer any and all questions.
Time for Andy.
David, this would be a fair question to ask a number of people, but as you're the one that's here speaking to us right now, what could you have personally done differently to prevent these issues that you just described from happening?
Yeah, I mean, I either make or delegate every decision that's made here. So you point to a decision that didn't work out, and I'm responsible for it. And so, we have all the resources we need. We have tremendous ownership support. We have tremendous fan support. And clearly we had segments of our team that were not good enough. And that's on me.
And are you prepared to say that Carlos will definitely be the manager next year?
Yeah, Carlos is coming back next year.
Mike.
David, how about the coaching staff? Do you think there'll be changes there?
We're going to go through an evaluation of our entire coaching staff. We'll do that over the course of coming days to a week, and then we'll make our decisions there.
And if you could go back to the trade deadline right now, knowing what you know now, what do you think you would do differently?
We don't get redos. We don't get do-overs in this business. But clearly the moves we made at the trade deadline, or at least a subset of those moves, didn't work. And in certain cases made us worse and didn't help us down the stretch.
What was the biggest surprise of that, or disappointment?
Well, look, I'm not going to every player we acquired was a true pro, worked their tails off, and did everything in their power to help us. And in a couple cases, it didn't work. And frankly, that too is on me and us. When we bring players in here, we got to set up an environment to allow them to succeed. We take a lot of pride in that. I take a lot of pride in that. And clearly at the deadline, we were unable to do that.
Manny.
You mentioned just the defensive side, how poorly was played toward the end of the season, especially. Just who's responsible for that, and just why did that happen toward the end of the year?
Yeah, look, I think it all starts with personnel, and that's my responsibility. We had a roster construction that at periods of the season put us in a position where we were putting suboptimal defenders in certain places, and that's an area where we got to get better.
Tony.
Just two follow-ups on what's already been asked. One, why is Carlos Mendoza the right person going forward?
Yeah, I believe Carlos has all the same traits and assets that I believed in when we hired him 2 years ago. And I think over the course of his tenure here, he has demonstrated that. We had a tough year this year, there's no question. We are all disappointed. We are all frustrated. Mendy, as much or more than anyone else. But I still believe he's a very good manager, and I think he's going to demonstrate that.
And two, just regarding the trade deadline, I mean, looking back, to what extent do you regret not acquiring a starting pitcher, even if that might have meant giving up a prospect that you clearly didn't want to give up?
So I think holistically, as I look at our pitching staff, we needed to do more over the course of the season. That is very clear. What we were faced at the deadline, I think our fan base would actually be perhaps even more upset if we had made some of those moves. But the entirety of our run prevention unit was not good enough this year.
Will?
Hey, David, going forward, what do you see as the most fixable thing for this club?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep harping on run prevention. Like that is where we fell short this year. It's where we need to get better. I think we will. I think that improvement can come both internally and externally. I very much believe in our player development apparatus. I believe we're developing very good pitchers. I think we're going to continue to do that, and that's going to continue to be an emphasis.
Just even over the offseason, you went short-term with starting pitchers, and then you did not trade for one at the deadline. Has this season changed your philosophy at all when it comes to external acquisitions on the starting pitching front?
I think we have to be open to everything. I think my continued emphasis is doing everything we can to support our development infrastructure and developing starting pitchers. Ultimately, that is where we're going to have sustained success and get to the organization a consistently good spot from a run prevention perspective. But going into this offseason, I'm not gonna take anything off the table.
Joel?
Dave, a few things. In your opening statement, you said we have to learn from this. What did you learn from this for moving forward?
Yeah, I think on a number of levels, there are areas where we can probably be a little bit more proactive, and I can be a little bit more proactive. I think some of these lessons we're still investigating and still fully understanding various aspects of our team. But there are clearly times in the season, times over the off season, where I can be a little bit more proactive.
Can you dig down on that? What does that mean to be proactive in what areas and what way?
I'm not going to get into specific transactions, specific forms of transactions, but there are areas where maybe we can get a little bit more aggressive.
And just maybe I'm using a different term, just the last thing is a sense of urgency about, like you said, some of those trades might have made your fans even sicker about it. It feels like to get the free agent you might want or get the trade you might want, there needs to be some irrationality. Do you work in one of those marketplaces where there needs to be some irrationality and maybe even more than you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think urgency is the right word. I do think urgency is the right word, and I think we have demonstrated that at points. In the free agent market, we have demonstrated senses of urgency. Frankly, I think in the trade market at points we demonstrated a sense of urgency. Certainly at the trade deadline we did. We didn't acquire players that ultimately, or in certain cases, we didn't acquire players that performed well here. And so clearly that did not work. But I think urgency is a very fair word.
On the right?
Hi, David. You spoke about postseason evaluations, but how much more intense and how much more of a fine-tooth comb will that be when it comes to the hitting, the pitching coaches, when you guys weren't able to make that October baseball run that you were hoping?
Yeah, we're going to certainly sit down and look at everything, including our coaching staff. It's normal after any season to do a coaching staff evaluation. When you come off of a disappointing season like this, it's certainly going to be a little bit more intense.
And after the high of last season and making that deep NLCS run and what you guys did in the postseason, getting Soto, re-signing Alonso, just can you replay for us your reaction on Sunday when that game was over and it hit you that you guys were not going to see in October? What was your reaction?
Yeah, extreme disappointment. Extreme disappointment. I think we all shared that, and that's certainly what I felt.
David?
Dave, aside from Pete Alonso's free agency, position-wise, you guys do have a lot of people coming back and the same core that you've had for a while. Do you anticipate making significant changes to that group? I know you talked about run prevention and some suboptimal positioning.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to be open-minded on our position player grouping so that we can improve our run prevention. Does that mean there are robust changes? I don't know. Does it mean people could be playing different positions? Maybe. Does it mean we ask people to play different roles? Maybe. A day after a season ends, I'm certainly not going to commit to what things look like in spring training or opening day. But I'll say it again. Our run prevention this year was not good enough, and that is both pitching and defense. They go hand in hand, and we need to improve them both.
On that same vein, do you think there's something about this particular mix of players that you have that just didn't, you talk about, I know it's just one stat, but, their inability to come back late, and that's, it's one stat, but you were the only team not to do it. Is there something about the way this team kind of played together during some of its more crucial times?
It's a very natural question because of some of those types of stats that are out there. I can tell you my experience in the clubhouse throughout this year is we had guys who cared about each other, who cared about winning, who worked hard. It's very difficult for me to explain how we were 0-70, trailing going into the ninth. I mean, that's an inexplicable stat, and I'm not going to hear him make up an answer for it.
Laura?
Just with regard to the offense, why do you think they fail to make in-game adjustments, especially towards the end of games?
I think there were definitely periods where we would score runs and then maybe have 3-4 innings where we weren't particularly active offensively. I think there were times where pitchers got a little bit sharper. Times where we probably could have made an in-game adjustment to an approach and didn't. And that's going to be part of what we talk about, what we assess, and try to improve there.
And also, I mean, obviously you guys had to rely on a lot of young talent. I mean, are you concerned at all about how that might affect their development, especially someone like Jonah Tong, who maybe struggled, or Ronnie Mauricio, who didn't really see a lot of playing time?
No, I think both those players saw, I think, meaningful playing time. Ronnie a little bit earlier when he came up. Jonah started a number of games for us. So I think their time in the big leagues will actually benefit their overall development.
Disha?
Hey, David, do you believe lack of leadership was an issue this season, either within the clubhouse or on the coaching staff?
I don't. I think we have leaders in our clubhouse. I think we had leadership in our clubhouse. I do not think that was a problem.
Do you think then they should have been able to maximize the potential on the roster if there was leadership there?
I come at this of we need to create a better roster that fits together better. I think our players worked their tails off. I think they came to the park with the right attitude every single day, and it didn't work. And so I need to take a long, hard look at our roster.
Jorge?
David, with Kodai, he's obviously had a couple injuries, tough injuries, but he's also had a couple mechanical issues where he couldn't come back and just wasn't himself. Can you rely on him to be that frontline starter next season, and how do you evaluate what he does?
Yeah, look, Kodai's had 2 very inconsistent, challenging years in a row. We know it's in there. We know there's potential. We're going to do everything we can to help get it out of him. But no, can we put him in ink as making 30 starts next year? I think that would be foolish.
And Francisco Alvarez, does he need some kind of surgery or operation?
He'll need surgery to repair his ligament. He's going to have that in the coming days.
John?
And just to drill down, be a little more specific on a couple of questions I think Will and Joel had asked previously. You were very successful in getting solid, good starters in your first year here and in Milwaukee, and that was tried again this time. And I'm wondering, obviously a lot of money was spent on the offense. Was there money left to do that, and you just decided not to go? Obviously there were some star pitchers out there, Fried, Burns, Crochet on the free agent market. Then a bunch at the trade deadline, though none of them did move. And is your philosophy changing? Do you feel like you said be more bold or something along those lines? Do you think that you would be more apt to? I know you considered Yamamoto or tried to get Yamamoto. Would you be more interested in adding a definite number one type starter? Are you going to look at that a little more seriously?
So I'll repeat what I said: is we're not going to take anything off the table. I think long term for the Mets, the best thing we can do is develop our own frontline starters. I think we're on our way to do that. I think we're demonstrating that. And so our main emphasis is going to continue to be there. But we're certainly not going to take anything off the table this offseason.
Okay, and then at the trade deadline, obviously there were players that could have helped you that did well elsewhere, particularly with the Phillies. I know you did talk to the Twins. I'd heard that for whatever reason they were making progress there. When you talked about being more aggressive, I heard that they were difficult at the time, but now looking back on it, they did trade 11 guys or something like that. Do you think you could have been more aggressive there, or do you think perhaps you have to look at the scouting because obviously two of the guys that you got who were pretty prominent guys who played well elsewhere did not perform in New York for whatever reason?
Yeah, so I'm not going to comment on trades that didn't happen. In terms of the guys we got, we've got to create an environment here, and I have to create an environment here where when players come here who are good players, that they have success here. That's our goal. And in a couple of cases here, we acquired players who really struggled.
Mark?
David,
Yep.
First of all, just apart from Alvarez, any other surgeries that you can announce?
No.
And you've harped a little bit on just needing to improve the defense. Your top free agent is a first baseman. Just what is your interest in bringing back Pete Alonso, and does that kind of complicate it a little bit?
Yeah, look, Pete is a great Met. He had a fantastic year. I said this last year, and it worked out. Like, I'd love to have Pete back, and we'll see where the offseason goes.
Do you see him as a first baseman, or would he be a DH option for you?
Look, I think how the exact roster construction hypothetically fills out, like, we'll deal with that as we get into the offseason.
Andy?
David, I remember in spring training, yourself and other people in your leadership group felt really good about your starting pitching. Thought it was maybe better than the outside expectations were on it. Do you think that you guys misevaluated something about it that you could then tweak in your evaluation process going forward? Or, was it, hey, Canning got hurt, Senga didn't give you what you thought? What I'm asking is, were you wrong to begin with on that, or did just things then happen?
I think it's a combination. I think, yeah, we were hit by injuries, but every club is hit by injuries, and we have to be able to have sufficient pitching depth to overcome that. And clearly, when we got hit by injuries in the middle of the season, we did not have the depth to overcome that.
And just on the defensive side of run prevention, obviously you look at the Brewers, you see a team that's very versatile, athletic, catches the ball. That's clearly a priority of yours. You inherited a roster here like anyone would coming into a job. How long do you think it takes roughly? How many years before you can meld a roster that is more in your image, in particular defensively?
Yeah, look, I think I take ownership over this roster. I've been here now for 2 years. That's plenty of time to shape a roster, to meld a roster. And so, yeah, I take ownership over the players that are here. As we continue to develop our players, that is naturally going to change the composition of our position player grouping. And yeah, I'd say holistically we need to get better defensively.
Jerry?
Hey, David. 2 questions. How much does this erase at all the progress you guys seemed to make organizationally last year with that run? And are you worried about a carryover effect next year for anybody who returns?
Look, a day after the season, I'm not going to speculate on a carryover effect into next year. I think right now, I think everyone's pretty damn motivated to get going and ensure that we can do better. And so I think that's where our focus is.
And this team, regular season-wise, is 8 games over 500 in the last 3 years, with a lot of highs, a lot of lows. How do you judge the ceiling for this core?
How do I judge? I'm sorry?
The ceiling for the core players you've got.
We have very good to elite core players who at times have played at a very high level. And a year ago had a very good season together. And so I think the ceiling remains high.
Tony?
I think most of the industry probably expects Edwin Diaz to opt out of his contract. Assuming that happens, just what is your appetite to bring or to allocate significant dollars to a reliever like that?
I think rather than speculating on what Edwin might do, I think we'll let him make that decision and then I can comment.
Tim?
Your 2 years, your 2 years here, you've had more or less a set plan at DH with Martinez and then the platoon this year. Do you plan to keep that more open next year? Or would you like to have a set guy as your DH?
I don't think I have a preference. I think we're going to evaluate the market as a whole and see how we can best put together our position player grouping.
Mike?
David, understood that every team would love to have 4 or 5 starters who throw 180 innings and stay healthy all year long and pitch well. But from an organizational standpoint, philosophy, from what you guys can build or control, coming off of this, do you feel like you maybe need to ask more of your starters in terms of build a staff that you can ask more of and ask more of them to get deeper in the game, deeper in games rather than be quick to protect them or pull them for relievers?
We need more innings out of our starting staff. There's no question about that. I think, we were on the edge for the first 2.5 months this year where we were getting 5+ innings per start pretty consistently. And that worked because it was happening every night. The minute you then get your 2 1/3 innings start, you get into trouble. And so that got us into trouble this year when we stopped getting the consistent 5+ inning starts, and occasionally there was the really short start, and then the next start was 5 1/3 innings. That gets you into trouble.
Will?
David, you talked about how you should have been a little bit more proactive at times. Why weren't you? Like, what stopped you from being more proactive?
Yeah, look, I think we are making the best decisions we possibly can with the information we have at the moment. And so, I made the best judgments I did. Clearly, some of them didn't work out, and now we try to learn and move forward.
Peter?
How do you envision the roles of McLean and Sproat and Tong going into next season right now?
But all 3 of those guys, I think, demonstrated that they can pitch at the major league level. At various points, all 3 of them pitched very well at the major league level. We'll see what our roster looks like when we get to Port St. Lucie. But I would certainly expect all 3 to have a role in the major leagues at some point next year. Don't know exactly when, but I think those guys should be really proud of what they accomplished this year.
Joel?
2 things. One is kind of a piggyback on that. How tough of a navigation system is it when you don't have clear feel for, like, some of the position guys who are close, Benj, Jet Williams, etc., and some of the pitchers, putting together the roster as far as making sure you want to leave space for them to come maybe, but you got to win next year, especially after this year?
I think incorporating young players into the mix is part of winning and part of winning consistently. So we can't shy away from doing that.
The second thing is, last year at this time, obviously, your team was coming off of a high, and a lot of faith had been built in your administration for this. It feels like a lot of that has been lost. Do you feel that, and do you feel any of it from the owner of the team, from Steve Cohn?
I think Steve expects excellence from our organization, and we did not display excellence this year, and we've got to do better.
Do you feel any lost faith in him from him?
No, I do not.
Andrew?
It was perhaps similar to my question. Obviously, you have a lot of money coming off the books for next year. What was the message from Steve about how you can approach this offseason going into 2026?
Look, I think a day after the season, we haven't had in-depth discussions on how we're going to approach this offseason.
John?
Yeah, when you were asked before about the 3 rookie starters, you kind of put them all in the same basket. At least that's the way I read it. At this point, when you consider McLean to be a starter for next year's team, I mean, he certainly looked pretty good.
Yeah, Nolan had a tremendous run for us. I'm not going to sit here and map out our starting rotation for next year, but I would expect Nolan is going to play a big part in our team next year.
Mark?
Hi, David. Last year in spring training, Steve said that ticket sales lag performance. So last year, after the tremendous performance, your sales went up. You mentioned in your opening you sensed the fan base's frustration. How much will that be a factor in 2 potential free agents being fan favorites in Pete and Edwin to maybe overlook budgetary constraints, but to reassure the fan base that you guys are still on the same page?
Whenever we're talking about departing free agents or players who were with us who are then free agents, it's always the holistic package of what that player brings to an organization. It's what he means to the team on the field, what that player means to the community, what that player means to the fan base. That is always part of the decision-making process, and I imagine it will be again this offseason.
And then second question was, you mentioned getting better on the defensive side of the ball. The fact that you have essentially 3 third basemen between Mauricio, Beatty, and Vientos. You know, Vientos and Beatty have shown they can handle the bat, and then you can even throw in Luis Angel Acuna in that mix. How difficult was it, trying to get them in, but you like the versatility? How much will that factor into looking at the roster construction next season?
Look, I think positional versatility is always helpful. Clearly, Beatty's ability to move over to second base proved to be enormously beneficial both for him and us at various points of this year. To his credit, he worked really hard and made himself a very viable defender at 2 positions on the dirt. I think each one of those guys you mentioned have slightly different defensive profiles, and so how they fit into a potential roster probably differs a little bit for each of them.
Disha?
Where do you stand on hiring someone for the GM role?
I think at this point, we always remain open should the perfect candidate come about, but it's not something we're going to go out and do a robust search process for.
Jerry?
David, 2 quick questions. We all know the record before June 12th and after June 12th. For you, looking at the season, is there a turning point for you that sticks out to you as that's where it started to go south for you guys?
Look, we played poorly the last 2 months of the season. I don't know that I can pinpoint a date, but we played poorly, bad baseball the last 2 months of the season.
And how would you evaluate Clay Holmes finishes in the top 10 in ERA? How do you evaluate his season, the transition to starting, and just the whole overall effect of doing that team-wide for you guys? Clay Holmes?
So I think Clay had a very successful year. And I think to his credit, after maybe going through a little phase of fatigue, he was able to bounce back and had a really strong finish of the year. He worked incredibly hard, gave us exactly what we could have hoped for, and clearly pitched a very good game for us over the weekend.
Laura?
Understanding that you guys value positional versatility, how much do you think that actually contributed to some of the defensive issues?
I think there were certain cases where we asked players to do things where they were a little unfamiliar with, and it contributed to some of the defensive challenges we had.
would that change your philosophy at all, or do you still feel like that's an important thing to have?
I do think positional versatility is important to have. I think it makes managing a game for a manager a little bit easier, and certainly makes constructing a roster a little bit easier.
Mike?
Do you have any read on what happened specifically with David Peterson and Sean Manaea here in the second half?
I think probably two very different cases there. I think Sean's season just never got going. I mean, Sean had an injury in camp, never got into a routine, had some frankly poor luck early on when he came back, and then that probably transitioned more into poor results. So Sean just like never got the ramp to the season. On David, I think he had a very, very good first half. Clearly he was an all-star. He pitched some big games for us, gave us a lot of innings. And then there probably was fatigue as he got towards the end of the line, and I think that contributed to what we saw in the second half.
Peter?
Just considering you went through free agency discussions with Pete last year, just how did those conversations maybe help or affect going through it again a second time?
I don't think I can sit here and speculate what's going to happen with the Pete Alonso negotiation this time.
Everybody good? Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
For the writers, the press box will be open. We'll have someone escort you up there. For the televisions, you can do a live shot outside by the Apple.